In this lesson, we'll continue our work on our speaker grill options. So we have our curves all created and ready to go for grill 1. So let's go ahead and make a second grill option. I'll just switch this off. Now I'm going to use the same boundary and the same center line. If I zoom out a little bit here and let me switch on my LCD bezel. So I really like the introduction of this squircle shape. So what I'm going to do is build a grill based off of that shape. That way we kind of tie the grill and the LCD together. It's just kind of a nice little design language or repetition of form. So I'm going to go over here under my rectangle tools, and I'm going to right click and choose rounded rectangle with conic corners. And to start this off, I want to click a little outside to the left and a little bit lower than my boundary, because our rectangular array that we're going to create will always start from the lower left corner. So my other corner length, I'll go 1.2 millimeters. And something about that looks good. And I want to make sure that this says conic, which it does. Then I'll zoom in just a little bit. Now I can really just kind of drag this. And the more I kind of go up into the corners, the tighter of a shape or more rectangular of a shape it is. And the more I move towards the center up to a point, more rounded of a rectangle it is. And that's really kind of up for you to judge whatever you like there. I'm going to go something a little bit like that. So I'll keep it somewhat softer. And that'll help me actually with my corners when I go to fillet the corners on my grill. So as I said, I've created this to the left and below where we're actually going to be operating. And now we're just going to apply a rectangular array to this. So I'll select it. I'll choose rectangular array. And if you remember in the previous movie, we now know that X moves things off to the right and Y moves things vertically in this view. So number in my X direction, let's see, let's try 18. And number in my Y direction, we'll go 18. Number in Z direction, I don't want this to move back into space, so it's always just going to be 1. So it'll just keep the original is 1. And then my spacing. I think I'll use a 2.25. And the same for the Y spacing, 2.25. Now, what's kind of nice is we do get a preview of this, so if any of these numbers are wrong, we can adjust them. So there we go. We get a nice little preview of that. I think my spacing's a little far apart, so let's go to a 2. And my Y is also going to be a 2. I think that closes that up kind of nicely. One thing I want to be sure that I do is I do want to center this. And at the moment, because I have an even number of rows and columns, it's going to be a little more difficult to find the center. Now, if I switch these to an odd number, and let me just make that 19, and make this one 19. Now that automatically gives me an odd number, so I end up with a middle row for all of this. So that actually helps me out. Even if I don't end up using these, I can delete those very easily. But ultimately, it helps me to position this group of squircles right in the center of my boundary box. So that all looks pretty good, I think. I'll just go ahead and hit OK. Now it's kind of a pain to select all of these. So I'm going to go under my Select options, and I'll click on my Select Last Created Objects. So that chooses everything. Now remember from before, it does not select the piece you use to create all of these. So I have to hold down Shift and click on that. I'll press Ctrl G to group these all together. Now I'm just going to move these off to the side. I want to make sure that I do get the center part here. Now because I have my gumball on, it automatically shows me the center, which is kind of nice. So I know this particular shape is the center rectangle of all of these rectangles. And to make that easy to work with, I'm just going to use my polyline tool. And I'll drag a vertical line right in there. So I have the center rectangle, and now I have a center line going through that rectangle. So I can use the move command, grab the midpoint of that, and find the midpoint of this. And now I know everything's lined up and everything is centered. And let me just go ahead and select that little curve that I drew, and we'll delete that. So I have my rectangular array, and I think that looks pretty good. Obviously, I need to do some cleanups and things like that to it. But before doing that, I do want to make a second version of this with an offset. So I'm going to make a layer and put these on. So make that layer, I'll call it Grill 2 Curves. I'll do a Change Object Layer. Change the color just so I get a nice visual of it. You can see those have all changed. So now what I'm going to do is right-click on this, and I'm going to choose Duplicate Layers and Objects. So I'm just going to switch that to Grill 3 Curves. And I'll make this a different color, again, just so it's easy for me to see. So now if I switch the blue layer off, you can see I have the green layer left. If I switch that off, and that back on, that comes in, so I know everything's good. I've got two layers that are currently identical. So let's go ahead and make some changes here. So for the Grill 2 curves, I'll select this and ungroup. And then just as before, it's just a matter of going in and deleting whatever curves you don't want. And again, I'm going to select everything to the left of the center line and delete those. And remember, anything that falls more than 50% outside this boundary, I'm going to go ahead and delete. Notice that's giving me kind of a nice stair-step look to that. And it's very natural when you're doing things like that. You'll see that in product design all the time. So now I'll take that, select everything to the right of my center rectangles. I'll go to Transform, and we'll mirror that over. Select on the end point of my center line, hold down my Shift key, and drag down. Again, I want to group these all together so it's easier to work with them. So I'll select one of these. I'll go under my Select options, and I'll select by color. Picks all of those, and I'll do a Control-G to group those together. So now those are all set to go. Turn that layer off, and let's switch this layer on. Select these, and I'll ungroup them. Now what I want to do with these is offset every other line. So I need to know how far to offset these. So if I go to my drafting tools and just measure them, I can find that this point to this point, I believe, is 2 millimeters. So if I offset each row 1 millimeter, then that'll put that directly in the center here. So this is just a matter of going through, and I'm going to drag a box, hold down the Shift key, every other row. Now, I don't know of an automated way to do this, unfortunately. So it's just a matter of kind of doing that. Because my gumball is switched on down here, I can just click on this red arrow. When I enter a number, whatever I enter is the number of millimeters these objects are going to move in that direction. So we know they're spaced 2 millimeters apart. So if I just move these 1 millimeter, they'll move half the distance. As you see, you get a nice offset there. Now this one's a little more finicky to go ahead and choose down the center line to make it easier to select. But if I come over here and select just to the right of that last set of rectangles, I can go ahead and delete everything on the outside of my bounding box here. And remember, it's kind of a judgment call. That one could go either way, I suppose. I think I'll delete that one. I think that looks pretty good. All right, so I'm going to select just to the right of my center line. Make sure I've got all of those points. And then we'll do a transform, and we'll mirror those points over. That looks pretty good. That point there could really go either way. Technically, most of it is inside that grill. We'll leave that and see how it looks. So if I take my center line and my bounding box, and I'll just go ahead and hide those. Now I have that grill pattern, I have this grill pattern, and I have my arrayed grill pattern. So we have three nice options that we can think about using to make hole patterns.